everybody, and welcome back to another episode of 7TV Fantasy Behind the Scenes, the talk show where we delve into the different elements that helped with the creation of the brand new cinematic war game, 7TV Fantasy. So today's episode, it's all about playtesting, a crucial stage during the development of the game. The mechanics were fine-tuned by a selection of trusted and arguably fanatic 7TV players. I think Carl would agree with that. But before we get into it, I'd just like to quickly introduce the guest for today's episode. Obviously, we have the ever eager Carl Perriton, who I'm sure all of you know and love by now if you've watched any of the other episodes. So thanks for joining. Carl, how are you today?
I thought I can be an eagle if it helps.
Yeah, an eagle works too.
I'm fighting an eagle right there.
Yeah, so we've got two sort of special guests for today's episode. But it's basically two guests who play tested the game, who Carl sort of decided that he wanted some select players to come in and actually just play the game just to see how it worked during some of the phases of the game's sort of development. First, we've got Shaun Pike, who kindly offered to lend his wisdom and experience to help playtest the game. So thanks for joining, Shaun. How are you today?
I'm very good, Eddie, thank you. And I don't know about wisdom and experience, but I'm an aged gamer, so I've been gaming a lot for a long time. And I'm really pleased to be part of this because it's been such fun to do the playtest.
Yeah, so we're looking forward to hearing what you've got to say. But before we go into what you actually did, I just want to know about your history with 7TV and when you first played it. What's your relationship with it?
This, I suspect, is going to sound very familiar to you, Eddie. I met Carl at a show.
I think everyone just meets him at shows.
It seems to be the entry point for 7TV for most, certainly UK players, I think, is that he's such an approachable guy, he's so friendly, so keen to share the love of 7TV. So I go way back to first edition. And
right, okay.
I must have been a salute getting on 10 years ago, I would guess, Carl. Picked up the book because it just looked so stunning, and I've really looked back. I was quite apprehensive about second ed when it first came out, because I thought I'd enjoyed tinkering with building my own cast, but the profile cards just make it so easy. Really never looked back, and actually, to be fair, I think Fantasy's the best yet, because there are so many profiles to choose from that there's just about everything you could ever wish for.
Yeah, no, that's really good. There's questions that I want to ask, but we'll get on to those.
Yeah, sure.
And lastly, our last guest, but by no means the least, we have Beau Schultz, who thoroughly analysed the game, provided key pointers that helped tremendously with the fine-tuning of the game during its development. So thanks for joining, Beau. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Good afternoon. How are you guys?
Yep. Really good, thank you for joining. So similar to Shaun, what was your history with 7TV? When did you first start playing? What was your relationship with the game?
I did not meet Carl at a show or in person at all yet. I was only vaguely aware of 7TV first edition. I bought in big to the models. I mean, at the time, I believe he was one of the very few, maybe two or three others that were making mid-century, modern figures as far as spy-fi, that kind of thing. And I did look at the rules for 1.0, but the hype was already starting to build that second edition was coming. First edition had a lot more heavy lifting as far as getting newer people in it, as far as the math and the homework of getting stuff together. So when second edition came out, I had pre-ordered that, and then once it arrived and I actually got playing it and got other people playing it, it quickly became my main miniature game. And ever since, that's pretty much it. 95% of what I play is 7TV moving forward.
Brilliant. I bet you've had some sort of really great games over the years. And
they have over here we don't have as many players, and so a lot of times I find myself doing more demos or teaching people the game, because I'm consistently rather trying to build the scene up. At least where I live, probably selfishly as much as anything else, so I have more players. Obviously, the pandemic has slowed that down a little bit, but as far as how narrative the game is and how it's fun, and how it has just the filter, there's no competitive version of 7TV, which I really like, and so it seems to attract the players that I want to hang out with. So that is one of its main benefits.
Cool. That's really good, like insightful information there. Thanks for that, Beau. So I just want to like sort of set the scene and sort of how we play tested sort of fantasy, because so we're talking about 17th fantasy. It's a game that's due to come out. So Carl, I'll start with you first. Am I right in saying that with we'll just go for the second edition versions of the games? Was the formal playtesting stage, was that usually done sort of just internally and with the developers, or have you also sort of reached out and sort of got other people into playtest during that sort of phase?
Yes, for each of the games from Inch High Spy-Fi, we've always kind of externally play tested. It was quite a jump between first and second edition anyway. So I think some of the people that play tested Fantasy play tested kind of 10 years ago on 5 years ago now, actually. Terrible track of time. On the original Inch High Spy-Fi. So it's essential, to make sure that you can knock the rough edges off. People uncover things that you've potentially not thought of as you've been kind of completely enclosed in this kind of games writing world. Sometimes it's you can get a little bit blinkered. So having people to come in and look at that completely fresh is always really useful. It's about kind of our fourth time round now with Fantasy, so there's kind of less to do each time, but we try to introduce some new elements with each kind of box set, so they always need a bit of a test, and it was really honestly seeing if we can kind of break them. Really, that's what we're trying to do with playtesting.
Yeah. So did you like when you play test, or you was going to sort of get people to play test it? Did you sort of think of things that you think were kind of broken anyway, or there was a certain sort of parts of the game you thought, right, they need to be sort of tested first? Or did you just initially say, right, just have a few games and just get a flavour? Or
the main thing is the profiles. We try to divide those out as much as possible. Fantasy's got 230, so more than any other. So we need to test as much as possible the interactions between those, the special effects and the star qualities, particularly, to make sure that they're not too kind of overpowered.
Yeah.
But then we look at the new parts of the game that we need to concentrate on as well. When it was Apocalypse, it had to be the new driving rules in there. With Pulp, it was some of the perils, and Fantasy this time there's been sort of whole new sections, magic and stuff like that we needed to test.
Right. Okay. Right, Beau, you mentioned earlier about sort of like how COVID has affected obviously playing 7TV, and I think that's sort of the case in terms of like social interaction. It's quite like a social sort of game where you constantly sort of breaking the COVID rules essentially. So how did you manage to sort of like play test during the lockdown? Did you play any like solo games, or did you play with like partners or people that you were sort of living with?
Yeah, I did a little bit of both. The Chris, who's the other local guy that really pushes 7TV on where I live, I would have anticipated playing most of those games. As you indicated, COVID made that not so possible. Yeah. We would do some, discussing and kind of what they call math hammer over here, where we would just kind of go over the stats and kind of work through different combats kind of thing, talking about how we thought it might work. But luckily, I have who's now an 18-year-old son who I basically just conscripted into playing games, which didn't give me, I guess, the insight of having a seasoned player, but I think it also worked well because it was someone that was less familiar, and so it gave me a good sense of, is this game easy to teach, and how could I teach it better, that kind of stuff. So I was able to get in some full games, and then we also did with my son just a couple of little, I guess, fake games where we'd set them up in the middle and just kind of go through combat, just go through magic, maybe mess with a relic, something like that.
Yeah, and Shaun, what about you? How did you sort of manage to play it during the lockdown?
Yeah, again, I'm fairly used to solo playing anyway, so that wasn't a particular problem. But a bit like Beau, although slightly older, my son is 27, but also fairly keen 7TV player. So we managed a couple of games over an iPad, Zoom link, that kind of thing, and actually that worked better than I'd hoped it would. So that was a really good tryout. We had a particularly splendid game pitting some vampires against monster hunters, which went horribly for me because his mum's a demon dice roller and she was rolling his dice for him.
But so you played virtually then? So you kind of had like two setups then, or?
I had one table.
Yeah, and then you just told him what.
Nice white base plus, so the figures showed up very well. And then a top-down camera and a roving camera, and it worked just fine. Actually, he told his mum where he wanted things to go. She moved them for him, and then they gave me a beatdown.
No, that's brilliant. I never actually thought of that for some reason, of playing sort of like that. I always thought, you could play it, but that's really creative. So, hopefully other people could maybe try and do the same and see how they get on with that. So, Beau, come back to you. How many sort of games did you play then during this playtesting of Fantasy? And what kind of tests did you do?
As far as full games, I would say it was less than a half a dozen. I couldn't tell you exactly how many little, experimental kind of things, concentrate on a particular piece of magic or a particular aspect of the game. So it just depended. My son is not a avid tabletop gamer, and so it was one of those things where I had to kind of break it up over weeks because if I don't want to burn him out or get him to throw the game just to make it end.
Yeah. And Carl, what was the process like? So, do you send out was it like a document that they then would complete like a certain element of the game and then sort of feed it back to you? What was the sort of the process?
Yes, we kind of drew up a kind of a playtesting document, really, so we could make sure we hit as many as the elements as we wanted to. We kind of divided up all of the profiles. In fact, actually, it was the stars, the co-stars, and the extras amongst all of the playtesters. I think even potentially some of the as well, to see kind of some of it. Does it feel like 7TV? There's a Matt Slade who was playtested all of the games right from the beginning and was valued his kind of feedback. And in a previous version of one of the games that we were developing, he kind of threw back, but it doesn't feel very 7TV. And that always strikes a kind of a note of horror in there and makes me kind of have a think what we could do. So it's general feedback. What do you think? Can you find any kind of howlers in there as well? And then there were some basic questions that we kind of asked everybody. How do you think this fits? How does it work? How do you think the interactions are as well? So it was a bit of an ask for people, but we got some really valuable stuff out of it.
Yeah, I just want to kind of bring it around to one of the new elements that we've developed during 7TV Fantasy, which was the new magic system. So I'll come to you first, Shaun. How long did it take you to sort of get to grips with the magic system? Was it kind of like a shock, or did it fit in? Did it blend in nicely? Applying spells in the game. What was your sort of experience on that?
Yeah, so you couldn't do fantasy without magic. It had to be there, and certainly the six flavours seem to fit the sort of usual fantasy genres nicely. Initially, we found it a little bit confusing because it seemed almost that any magic user could almost cast any moderate level spell quite easily. So we had a couple of goes around how to make that a little bit more of not a guaranteed success, if you like it, and I think where we've ended up has done that very well. And also, I think initially it felt a little bit too open with some more powerful creatures and magic users having access to a lot of spells, and trying to keep those all in your head to see which one you wanted to use when would have been quite difficult. So I think narrowing it down to a confined list for a game is a much better idea. So, but again, most of us come from other games that have magic systems, and this one certainly fits the 7TV ethos very well, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And what about you, Beau? Did you sort of find this experience the same?
I think it was, as Shaun indicated, it did seem a little bit too easy at the first go round, especially you could focus the spell and whatnot. And it was good that they were going off all the time. But like a lot of the elements of this version of 7TV and others, it's also very bolt-on. kind of like the driving rules were as far as, I don't mean that in a, in a bad way, but you could play the game without it if you were first playing someone through, because it's its own individual system. It's not directly tied through just like apparel or anything else. So the first little bits that we were trying, we did it without the magic, and then we could add the magic and just kind of layer it in. But everybody seemed to have fairly similar feedback on the magic, and the fact that it has very distinct flavors across the board of what kind of magic should go with whom now seems extremely logical. But I also like how it's finite, and everyone can't just do whatever they want. So I think it ended in a really good place.
Yeah, because I know obviously magic was probably the element that changed the most throughout the development. Is that right, Cal? It changed quite a lot of times.
Yes, the magic system is the thing that probably changed most during the playtesting. In there, it's always it's the trick of finding that balance against kind of cinematic and good kind of gameplay in there. So the insights that the rest of the guys gave us were invaluable. We dropped down that kind of difficulty curve. We kind of wanted everybody to have access to everything to start off with. So we probably made that a little bit too easy. And then we also drew back again on the amount of spells. It was just the amount of housekeeping, as kind of Shaun said, that you needed to do was a little bit too much. So we narrowed that down, and I think it's much the better for it.
Yeah. But we'll just go to you, Shaun, then quickly. Because I think it was you actually, Beau, who said about sort of picking up like a novice and introducing them to the game sort of for the first time. And do you think it's like it's complicated for them, or do you reckon they can sort of connect to it well, or do you have to kind of just sort of pace them in, or what's your thoughts on that?
Are you asking me how easy it was to get new people in, or are you asking?
You, sorry, Beau. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. I think it's logical the way that it goes. As far as the characters too, most of the magic characters, as you might imagine, there's like the stronger version and the medium, kind of a Goldilocks situation where it makes sense how things dial in. So I don't think it was overly complicated. I play a lot of different miniature games, and so I guess I could be looking at it differently. But my son, being comparatively a novice, I thought was able to pick it up pretty well.
Yeah, and what about you, Shaun? How do you think like a novice would sort of be able to sort of take to it?
I have the benefit that Alex has played 7TV and other iterations, so he picked it up very quickly. I think the beauty of the system is the core system is very easy to talk through in about 5 or 10 minutes. And then the nuance is all in the cards. So as long as you get a cast that hangs together nicely for a beginner and give them just a few gentle steers, actually it will pretty much take care of itself. That's certainly how Carl runs his demos, and they work fabulously at shows. So yeah, I don't see this being any harder to teach a newcomer than any other versions. And I think it's the mass appeal that most people know some version of fantasy.
Yeah, for sure. So did you play any encounters then, or did you sort of build your own sort of casts, Shaun?
So we were tasked to build our own casts around the key star and co-star. So I had the Demonic Fiend and the Greedy Governor for my villains, and the Dungeoneer, and I tragically forget who for my heroes. But my absolute favourite is Greedy Governor. He's such an annoying character with his presence attacks and so forth. And then we were given those tasks to play through. So I think the first one I was given Raiders as an encounter to work through, and that pretty much wiped out my hero cast in the first end of Act 1. So that made for a very short game, and need a bit of thinking about. But it was great fun, and again, we're pretty used to the cast building thing, so that was no problem.
Yeah, and for you, Beau, when you play 7TV or play in 7TV Fantasy and play testing it, do you ever find yourself like or when you play the game, have you ever like adapted the rules and sort of fit them to sort of situations that you find yourself in? Have you made sort of like, because when I play 7TV or when I played 7TV Pulp, there were sort of situations where you can be kind of loose and be come to an agreement about certain things. Did you find that you did that when you were playtesting?
Yeah, to a certain extent, not as much. I mean, we do a lot of house ruling and stuff based on scenarios with the other iterations. we did it a little bit. Like usually, either we'll agree not to steal the scene, especially playtesting. Steal the scene. We didn't know how much that would totally, wreck things. The deployment zones are smaller and whatnot in this version than the other, so a lot of the stuff that we will often sprinkle on that we didn't have to change tremendously. But there were the specific scenarios we were trying out, which we did and gave feedback on. But I'm a fairly avid scenario writer that we like to make our own stuff, so we certainly did that, and we played around with some of the relics that we thought would be the most ambitious. Normally 7TV, since it's about let's all have fun. I kind of go out of my way, especially if I'm playing with a new person, not to build something that's evil or kind of a filthy list. Playtesting, it's kind of weird because you're kind of going against the grain of the social contract on purpose, where you're trying to see if you can break it and just how filthy it'll be and how unpleasant it will be to see if it needs to change. So that was a little unusual, but we got through that.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, that makes sense. So, Shaun, when you were playtesting, did you ever feel like restricted when you were playtesting, or did you feel that you had to kind of try and break the game, like Beau was saying, or did you feel like you could just kind of do whatever you want and just see if it could work?
I actually quite enjoyed the playing around with it, and some of the fun is seeing if you can break it. I had a hugely fun game with a very Greek-themed cast with the Silo and the Hoplites, and see those working together to catapult the Hoplites up the beach by moving them 2 inches every time a Silo activated was fantastic. It really felt like one of those opening scenes from one of the Troy movies. So, yeah, it's good fun, and really, just, I think, for me, was a joy to play with, and I didn't really manage, I don't think, to break anything, although my vampires did manage to dominate 4 of Alex's characters, but he had so many plot points, he just ran around and undominated them all on his go, and then threw the holy hand grenade at me.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you a little bit about plot points as well. So I'll take this to you, Beau. Did you find like the plot point kind of works the same as it does in the other versions? Or do you find that you can pool them better, or was there any kind of thing you noticed, or is it just obviously per game and obviously per chance?
Yeah, I mean, it works obviously very much like the earlier iterations. Running like undead or what we call like a battery list, where you have like a lot of extras that are just generating lots of plot points can make it a little unusual, especially if someone's rolling bad. But yeah, the plot points have the same kind of feel where you can, have the scene where everybody's just doing a little bit of something where you're kind of spreading them out, or you can just dump them all into a couple guys for the, close-up action scene. So, which is obviously the main engine with 17E and probably the main appeal. But I think it very much works the same way that the other ones do, as far as being a good balance of how hard you can hit when.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just a little bit conscious of time, but I will ask you one last question each. Shaun, are you? What would be like the first game when the 7TV game comes out? What are you sort of like most excited about? What are you gonna first gonna play?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think I'm going back to my Greeks versus Trojans on a beach. I'm going to see if I can shoehorn in a wooden horse somehow or other, but
okay,
we'll see where we get to.
And what about you, Beau? What's the first game you'll play when you get your hands on the game?
I have some goblins that are dressed in armor, some knights that I've been painting up just in anticipation of getting a hold of it. So that'll probably be the first crew I have, and then since my first one will probably be a demo game at the local game store, it'll be whatever they happen to have, because the nice thing about fantasy is everybody's got a handful somewhere.
Yeah, well, brilliant. Well, thank you both so much for joining today, and obviously Carl as well for your great assistance and insights as well. But that should just about do it for today's episode. So thank you again, everyone. It's been a pleasure, and thank you everyone for watching. And we'll see you all in the next episode. Bye for now.